Alright guys, so today we're talking about Dying Light 2. Now today we're doing a first impressions video. I don't want to do a full review, we're not there yet, haven't beaten the game. If you don't know me, I like to get through the whole game, do everything I'm going to do, be done with it, unless of course it's a multiplayer game, before I make my full review. Right now, the time of making this first impressions video, I'm roughly about 20 hours into the game. If you've played it, I'm just getting into the second region and meeting all of the characters there, so I'm going to try to stay spoiler free for the most part, but there might be some gameplay mechanics and locations that have spoilers in them. Now, if you would have asked me what the first Dying Light game was, I would have defined it as an open-world action-adventure story game, but see here in Dying Light 2, through their own settings, this game is defined as a semi-RPG action-adventure story game, right? And so those RPG elements are very light and you know, compared to some other games like the new Assassin's Creed games or just full-on RPG games, it's very light. It's not in your face. Your HUD isn't too overwhelming, although there is a lot there, but for the most part it sticks to that same structure as the first Dying Light game. Now, in case you didn't play the first Dying Light game, what do? Well, if you've played pretty much any zombie story game, right, essentially you start out with really crappy weapons and then this really crappy area with crappy gear and skills, and then as you go further and progress, you get new crafting recipes and unlock new weapons, going from things like pipes and bats to swords and cleavers, and even in some games. Now, what the first Dying Light did so well was it took that whole genre of just zombie story type game and took all of that boring stuff that you've seen a million times and introduced parkour into it, along with a really gritty and just over-the-top gore system, right? And so that's really the foundation of this game, is all that crafting and finding cooler and better weapons and having skills in the parkour and all of that stuff. That's what makes this game unique and different and what it is. And so with that all in mind, let's do a quick first impressions on Dying Light 2. So I am heavily biased. While my channel was not around to review the first Dying Light game because that was a long time ago, I have played it at least 4 or 5 times all the way through, and then more just playing through sections here and there. And if I had to give it a score without making a 40-minute review on it, it'd probably sit comfortable at an 8 if you know, depending if you include the DLC and all of that stuff. So just keep in mind where I sit on the first game while we talk about the second one. So the second game does pretty much everything the first game does and just improves on it. Now, that being said, it does do this one thing that isn't specific to Dying Light. Every game does it, and that's that it takes away previous mechanics while adding new ones. Call of Duty does it every single year. They do it here. For example, the game's broken down, like I said earlier, into this RPG system with gear and all of that stuff, and the first game kind of had that, but it didn't have so much of this numbers game and different rarities of gear to this extent. It definitely did, but not to the extent that it is here. Right, there weren't levels to zombies. It was kind of just different enemy types or different difficulties, and here it's completely different. The boss in a level 1 area could be significantly stronger than a grunt in a level 4 area, and you have to level up your character in order to change your stats. That being said, let's talk about progression. All of the progression in the game is tied to either combat or parkour skills. And this is things like, you know, rolling so you don't take extra fall damage, being able to stomp enemies while they're on the ground, being able to assassinate enemies quicker, you know, being able to lunge off of vaults, and then spoiler stuff that I won't talk about, but that heavily impact the way you traverse the game. And so those things are really what you're playing for, and they did it a bit differently here. It's still broken down into skill trees that you get by just naturally either fighting or doing parkour. But then there's another system down here at the bottom. So aside from the main story, obviously, your gear and the skill tree, this leveling system at the bottom is broken down by collecting these injectors. You need 3 injectors found to spend a skill point, if that's what you wish to call it, right? And as you spend a skill point, let's say in health, your maximum health increases and you unlock more combat skills. As you spend one in stamina, your maximum stamina increases and you unlock more parkour skills. And so you really have your progression split, other than story progression, into 3 separate paths, right? Your gear and your weapon and your mods and all that stuff, your money, your actual skills within the tree, and then your overall health and stamina levels. Now there is an entire tree here that is missing from the first game, which I will get into in the full review, but I don't want to talk about that now because I don't want this first impressions to be too long. So this system works really well, and I think why this works, you see that immunity symbol down there at the bottom. The way night is reworked in this game, and that's perhaps the biggest change, is that it's no longer just insanely difficult to survive at night. They don't throw all the ferals out at night and just let them wreck you. The way it works now is as long as you stay on the rooftops, you're relatively okay. Unless a screecher sees you and then starts a chase and all of these enemies come after you, you have to get to a safe zone to end the chase. But you also have the threat of this timer. In this game, it's 15 years after the first, everybody's infected. Right? And the only way to stay not infected is UV light, whether that's through the sun during the day or at night by standing around UV light sources. So it's no longer the focus of being super stealthy and trying to not get detected by all of these super tough enemies. While that's still here, you also have this ticking bomb on your screen that forces you to maneuver around the map relatively quickly to get to the next safe zone or have plenty of consumables on you in order to stay alive. Now the coolest part about this is these new zones they have where you have to go in at night because there's a bunch of zombies in the building during the day, and while you're in there at night, this timer is ticking down, and all of the good loot is in these areas that just kill your timer, and I think that's probably the best part of the game, right? They have boss fights and all of this stuff, and all these story stuff, and the goofy side missions and all of that stuff. But the best part is definitely, at least so far, these areas where you put up against tough enemies and a clock to rapidly progress your character by finding these 3 injectors to pretty much guarantee yourself a level up. But you have to come with the right consumables and the right equipment in order to be able to survive in the dark zone. So that's progression and the biggest change to the game overall gameplay wise. For the most part, everything's pretty much the same from the first game. Obviously I'll break it down more in my full review, but I want to keep it relatively short. As for the story, not going to talk about that. There's dialogue options here and choices that may or may not matter. Don't know enough about that yet to fully go into it. But I just want to say, final thing, end of first impressions video. Playing on console, I'm playing on a Series X, and what you're seeing, everything you're seeing is in performance mode. And again, talk about this more in my review, but resolution mode and quality mode are practically unplayable, right? I mean, you get pushed up to that higher resolution, past that 1080p and 1440p, and you get ray tracing and quality mode, but the frame rate, I mean, it's below 30. And I don't even mean with a horde chasing you, fighting a bunch of zombies with explosions on your screen. Just standing there on a rooftop, you're maybe getting 30 FPS, and it's rough, especially in something like this where you're moving quickly and making decisions on how you want to navigate, and that could get a bunch of zombies off of you, and you're doing parkour constantly. You can't have a low frame rate like that. But overall, for the most part, I really like the game so far, right? There's annoyances, like I keep getting disconnected in co-op every 45 minutes to an hour. I have to relaunch my game and reconnect. I've had a couple of hard crashes, but again, for the most part, gameplay wise and story wise and how the game works as a whole, I'm really enjoying it. But guys, let me know what you think so far. No spoilers in this first impressions video down in the comments. We'll save that for the review. That may or may not be coming out this Wednesday. I highly doubt it, just because of 20 hours in where I think I am. It seems like very little has happened, and so I probably have, at least if I had to guess, another 20 hours to put on this. Like, could be more, I don't know. This could be one of those reviews that a month after launch the review comes out, but it is what it is. Let me know what you guys think of the game so far, and I'll see you on the next one.